Hello.
Hello.
On a beautiful sunny September Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Back for a before breakfast VC sharing.
Yeah.
So let's see how that goes.
Crucially, we didn't blow anything up.
No, nothing blew up. In fact, it turned out it was all about the cartridge. The amp was fine.
Very good.
So, and it's for the hi-fi heads, we've moved to a Denon. Oh, no, I can't remember what it is now. Anyway, it's a moving coil. Sounds very nice and warm.
Sounds like something contraception.
So we kicked off our session with some Tito Puente and his Latin ensemble and his version. Well, actually, it's his tune, isn't it? Of course, Oye Como Va.
Yeah.
And made famous by Santana, but actually it's a Tito Puente tune, and it's a live version. This is an album on the Picante label. Came out in the early 80s, I think. And John and I realised that we'd both been at the same Tito Puente gig at the Hammersmith Palais.
Before we knew each other. Yeah.
Before we knew each other, which is probably about it was probably about 1984, I think. It's a double header with Celia Cruz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I've actually had quite a lot of salsa in my box for the last couple of sessions, and then took it all out for this one. So I didn't have, but I was able to carry on in a Latin mode with Gabo Azarbo, the guitarist, from his album Spellbinder, and played the track Spellbinder itself with it. And here he's got a band with Chico Hamilton on drums and Ron Carter on bass, and Victor Pantoja and Willie Bobo on Latin percussion. So there's quite a strong Latin kind of vibe to it.
Sounded really nice.
Quite a strong connection again between Gabo Zarba and again with Carlos Santana, because he was very influenced by Zarba. Lovely, clean. If you don't know his music, he's obviously not coming from a Latin background. He's coming from more from a Hungarian kind of gypsy kind of sound. Very clean lines. Very kind of always been a very interesting player to me. Actually, he's great music on Impulse, but also on a few albums on CTI, which are worth a listen as well.
He does a lot of using open strings.
Yeah.
As he sort of to kind of create a drone.
Yeah.
As he solos. It's really, really completely original sound.
Yeah.
Really nice.
And there's a lovely little 20-minute YouTube documentary on Gabo Zarba. You should check that as well.
Well, this next one, at the last session, John reminded me that the guitarist Steve Kahn has a fantastic website where one part of it he's just recommending and talking about music and albums that he loves, which is worth checking. And a surprising one to me was that he loves Sergio Mendes' Brasileiro, which is a sort of, I think, mid-90s album, and I've got the new Music on Vinyl pressing, which is beautiful. And Sergio Mendes, Brazilian arranger, I guess, really.
Yeah.
Has just brought together an amazing array of the best of Brazilian and the kind of best of the LA session players, and has kind of dipped into the Brazilian songbook, and it's a fantastic album, really amazing sounding on vinyl. And we listened to a track by that was written and I think actually also performed by Hermeto Pascal, and it was called Pipoca.
I remember I bought the CD years and years ago, actually, and looked at it, and I think it was very cheap. I'm thinking this is not going to be a good album at all. It was every track list, the personnel started off with about 4 synthesizer players.
Yes.
And I thought, this is not going to be, and then it turned out it's fantastic, actually. Then I don't know why I played this next.
No,
actually.
I don't know.
This was a bit of a strange left turn,
It was
actually.
very left.
Yeah. But anyway, so I think I've probably run out of anything with a Latin connection, actually. So I played another track off the Blind Bliant album, which a few people seem to like for the last time I showed it, and played the track called Michael Jackson Pollock off it, which is a kind of weird, dislocated kind of funk thing, really, with strange, out-of-time drumming and...
quite heavy.
With quite a heavy kind of vibe to it as well. I mean, this album, every track is completely different to the others. There's absolutely no binding style thing at all on it. And which one of those you wore one of these suits?
I did. I wore one of these suits.
Yeah. So the next session you might walk in one of those.
Yeah, that very same
So
suit.
that will liven up the VC.
That would, yes. Well, I then moved on to my first CD of the. And I guess there was just something about the kind of contemporary
Very much so.
sound that blended with this, and this is a CD that's just come out by someone called Miles Okazaki, who's a guitarist, and this also features Craig Taborn on piano, Anthony Tidd on bass, and Sean Rickman on the drums. I mean, I've literally only just got it, so I've probably only listened to it once, but I really like the second track, which is called Mischief. And this basically came because I'd sort of I'd been reading something about a band called Quite Sane, or Quiet Sane, or Quite Sane.
Quite Sane.
Quite Sane,
Yeah,
I think
so.
Quite Sane, which was led by the UK bass player called Anthony Tidd. And they were around, I guess, sort of early 90s. I think the album came out in 94. It's just one album. But it's actually really good.
It is, yeah.
And was very much, you know, the sound of a particular kind of cutting-edge UK jazz fusion sound, I guess, of the time, and had some great players. Erica Papoulet, it's got Esker on vocals, and Anthony Tidd is an amazing bass player, who then, I think he already was working with Steve.
All the four of these played with Steve Coleman.
Yeah, they all play with Steve
I
Coleman.
mean, he was like amazingly unsung, really epicenter of music. I think,
Yeah.
Steve Coleman. Also, there's a big crossover with the Philly hip hop scene because Anthony Tidd produced the Jazzy Fat Nasties.
That's right,
with the Roots.
And yeah, they produced the first Roots album in the UK, or he was involved in
He
it?
was involved with it, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there was a kind of, interesting, actually. He's still there, still playing in America. Then went for, again, something some people made me think of Herbie Hancock's Mr. Hands album, which is, I think, from early 80s, or 79, I think. No, 1980, which is a great Herbie album. It's after the original Headhunters have broken up, but this track I played, which is called Shiftless Shuffle, actually does feature the original Headhunters, including Harvey Mason on drums. Amazing drums.
Incredible.
Paul Jackson, a little bit of Benny Maupin, not much Benny Maupin.
Hardly
on this
any
track.
Benny.
Mostly a rhythm section workout, but it's got some great tracks on this. It's also got the track 4 AM, which is a Jaco Pastorius kind of meltdown.
This was a meltdown track. I mean, the bass playing is just.
I actually thought it was at the wrong speed. At one point. I just thought it ridiculous.
The connection with the next tune was Herbie, actually, who also features on this. Well, if any people who keenly watch our videos could maybe tell us if we've already shown this album. John was sure that we had, and I'd actually played this very track. Anyway, it was a good track. It's off Norman Connor's first solo album, and the album's called Dance of Magic. And we listened to the track called Blue, which is written and features the upright playing of Stanley Clarke. And the album's, it's got Herbie, Carlos Garnett, Gary Bartz, Eddie Henderson, Cecil McBee, Al Mouzon, Billy Hart, Airto. It's a pretty stellar set. I mean, the whole of the first track is just like a kind of spiritual jazz fusion track. But yeah, it sounded good.
Sounded very good.
Very open sounding.
Then I went for purchase from the last record fair in Whitstable. We went to around the last session, wasn't it? I think actually.
Session before,
before last, yeah. And this is an album on. This is actually a UK issue of an album on Mainstream, Blue Mitchell album called Blues, which is features actually has John Mayall, the UK blues harmonica player, and singer on it as well. But Blue Mitchell was actually in his band. But a great band, I love Bob Shadd's production sound he gets on Mainstream as well. So it had Joe Sample, John Guerin and Ray Pounds, the wonderfully named Ray Pounds on drums. Just a very nice kind of soul jazz kind of sound, really. But really good album, actually. Most of the stuff on Mainstream is actually worth picking up and listening to, actually.
Next up, there's quite a few tracks that we played that were a whole album's worth of music. And I said to John, I'm about to play a track that's going to take up a whole album. He said, well, let's see if it's any good. And it was rather good.
Oh, we know this track, yeah.
Julius Hemphill. It's from his album Coon Business, and it's the whole of side 2. which is a track called The Hard Blues, which basically features a lineup which is sort of cello, drums, sax, trumpet and baritone sax, and it's just an incredibly intense, visceral piece of music. It's really kind of quite arresting. It's not background music, but it's also sort of steeped in this kind of New Orleans blues, but then incredibly expressive. It's an amazing tune. Really worth.
And if you check back about a year on our sessions, we played the track Dogon AD off the other half of this. Hugely influential Judas sample on lots of people, particularly David Sanborn of all people, and also Tim Byrne, the American saxophone player. Then played actually two of the same players in a very different setting. Actually, this is by Kida Carroll, who's a trumpet player on the Judas Hempel record, and Judas is on this along with Anthony Davis on piano, Dave Holland on bass, and Ferone Aklaf, I think you pronounce it, on drums. And this was an album that came out in the early 80s, around the same time, on Soul Note, which was a subsidiary of Black Saint Records in Italy. He did an amazing job through the 80s of putting really, really good, mostly acoustically based music out, when nobody really was doing it in the States at all, actually. And this album's called Shadows and Reflections, very beautiful record. Sounds almost like a late Blue Note record rather than a free jazz thing.
It definitely didn't sound like it was played in 1982.
No, that's right. And played the Jack Jahi Sundance Lake off here as well. But Bakita Carroll's a great trumpet player, I think. So it's the kind of same musicians in a very, very different setting, actually.
I think we must have taken a break for some sheep's cheese at this moment, because I can't see what the connection was between that and my bargain purchase of the summer holiday, which was a copy of Todd Rundgren and Utopia's Ra, which I think is the second or third Utopia album. Definitely sounded like Todd was listening to quite a lot of Queen at the time. Yeah. And we listened to a track called Eternal Love. I mean, as ever, pure Todd sort of suddenly goes into a whole section where it sounded like the Beach Boys had suddenly been flown in, but they were singing backwards. But yeah, you really can't go wrong with Todd album.
And in fact, somehow I forgot to bring his new album with me, actually, which is very, very good, which is called White Knight. It's got just a really interesting album. Got some great people. Got a track with Donald Fagen and one with Dame Funk as well on there as well. Something about the kind of there's slightly rocky sound of that made me think of kind of Toto really and Leon, and this Leon Ware album. He's obviously he's not a rock singer at all. Leon Ware album from early 80s. It's a very rare album, going for huge amounts of money. Played the track Slipping Away on here, but it's also got the famous track Why I Came to California on it as well. Leon Ware kind of worked a lot with Marvin Gaye. He actually was as involved with Marvin on I Want You album, certainly. Great singer. This has got a kind of nice organic early 80s sound, actually. Doesn't sound too programmed at all, actually. And this was a reissue on the Be With Records label. We've done a really nice job on this, and also re-released Nod Doheny as well. Or Doheny, however you pronounce his name.
Nod Doheny.
Ned. Sorry, I've got a cold. I've had flu all week.
This is interesting. We were obviously staying in the 80s. This is an album from 1980. Again, some very keen sartorial notes to be taken from the Isley Brothers here. And this is the album called Go All the Way. And we listened to a track called Here We Go Again, parts 1 and 2, with an exceptional outro coda.
Outro coda is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, again, well, you know we love the Isley Brothers. They don't get enough love, I don't think.
They don't, no.
I think they're beginning to, but...
does mean you can pick up all their albums, actually, for nothing.
Absolutely.
And you need all their albums, actually.
Yeah.
Then went from the Isley Brothers, went back a few years into mid-70s and went for
matching the cover there.
Very tasteful cover. Gene Page, of course, who worked a lot with Barry White, and this is actually produced by Barry White, this album. It's called Hot City. and played his version of Satin Soul, which is like a Barry White Love Unlimited classic, but slightly speeded up with slightly more prominent drums as well on it. And yeah, like Gene Page, he also I also picked up the Blackula soundtrack recently as well, which I'll probably bring to the next session as well, which is another classic.
Is it?
Gene Page, yeah.
Talking of classics, this is a rare classic album by Eddie Kendricks called People Hold On. A really fantastic album. Very bizarrely, it's on very, very flimsy, thin vinyl, but sounds amazing. And we listened to the absolute classic called Girl, You Need a Change of Mind, which sort of was like a kind of proto-disco breakdown track.
Really good.
Amazing. If you don't know that track, have a listen on YouTube.
There was a whole period where, during the oil crisis in the States, where they had to print records on very thin vinyl, but it shouldn't make any difference because it's not actually the weight of the vinyl, it's the depth of the groove. That's this week's golden motto.
It's all about the depth of your groove, John.
So when you see something that's printed on 200-gram vinyl, it doesn't mean anything at all. Actually, basically, it's how deep the grooves are. Temptations, Sky's the Limit. A few years before, same label on Motown, played the track Smiling Faces, which is a classic kind of Norman Whitfield psychedelic soul Temptations promotion with another absolutely horrible cover. We seem to be really amping up the horrible covers. In fact, you just trump. This is the card game. You just won the hand. This one.
Well, everybody likes some Little Beaver.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big Little Beaver fans here.
Big Little Beaver fans. This, I think, is the best Little Beaver album. It's called Party Down. Features some bass cameo performances from Jaco Pastorius, known as Nelson Jocko Padron. But we listened to the track called Let the Good Times Roll. Just an amazing, just an amazing sound. There's like all the albums have got this. It's got a simmering sort of Sly Stone-esque use of a drum machine, but with real drums layered over the top. And Little Beaver always uses a lot of delay in his playing, so he's kind of bluesily, spacily
kind of almost Wes Montgomery sound
yeah.
He's got in this as well.
And a great voice.
Yeah.
And amazing grooves. I mean, the bass on this just sounded enormous.
Some of Jaco's first ever bass performances, I think. Yeah. So we then stayed with kind of 70s sound and went for Curtis Mayfield album, which I don't think is well known enough, actually.
It's fantastic.
Which is Back to the World, which is his album he made about veterans returning from Vietnam, basically. And it came out after, I just remembered actually this morning, it came out after Superfly, and was kind of probably slightly overshadowed by Superfly, I guess. Again, all of the Curtis Mayfield albums on his own label, Curtom, are all worth getting. They're all brilliant, actually. And played the track Right On for the Darkness, which starts off with a kind of very, very sparse groove, just played on.
And just really kind of
builds to this kind of epic ending.
Yeah, sort of really intimate guitar sound.
Yeah.
Really nice.
And he always gets such a dry sound on his production. I think that's what makes it so interesting, really.
Well,
love Curtis.
Last time John and I were together, which was about a month ago, and again we're doing this today, is we'll be going and spinning some records at this shop called Vinyl Head in Ramsgate, and one of the tunes that John spun was off this Sly and the Family Stone album called Small Talk, and what was the track called? Was it called Time to
Can't
Live?
Strain Your Brain.
Can't Strain My Brain, that's it. Can't Strain My Brain. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but very sort of undersung, underappreciated, under-recognised Sly album, but it's really great, actually.
Just really makes me think about how you should never take any notice of critics, really. You should make your own mind about music, really, because this album's always been panned by critics, and it's kind of just great. Really.
Well, the sad thing is, after this lovely family photo, apparently sort of 3 months later, his wife left him.
That's right, yeah.
So,
and he moved in with a tiger or something.
Yes.
Or something. Then we had a break, and then we went to, or maybe we didn't have a break actually. We went straight. Then we went. It was tribute time, really, and tribute to Holger Zukai, who of course died since the last session we had, and Mark did a nice. Did you do a tribute on?
I did
on the radio as well. Yeah, to him. I mean, you can the bass player from Cannes, extraordinary visionary guy, basically. I mean, kind of. It isn't a kind of. He didn't really invent sampling, but he brought sampling into pop music, undoubtedly, actually, and working with Stockhausen and so forth before. His, and some of his early music just sounds like it's about 20 years before its time, actually. So I played the Cannes track, played Mother Sky off Cannes soundtracks, which ended up being their kind of second album that came out, although it was kind of 1.5 albums they called it. But it was obviously a soundtrack record rather than anything else. But Mother Sky is a fantastic track.
Very heavy.
Very heavy track indeed, with some very heavy guitar playing as well. And these remasters, these mute remasters sound amazing.
Incredible.
Absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah.
And they don't cost a lot of money either.
No.
And if you go to the mute site, they nearly always have them on offer of some kind or other. This was, I think, when I bought this a couple of years ago, I think it was like £12 or something.
Well, this is probably one of my favourite Cannes albums, Iggy Bamyazi, and we listened to the track One More Night, which also features some fantastic sort of half-sung, half-whispered vocals from Damo Suzuki. But actually it's all about a kind of cyclical bass riff where he's playing the harmonics on the bass, and it's just a really arresting groove. The first time I heard this was actually at a sort of kind of electronic music night, and it was my friend Frank Bing was DJing, and I just thought, the hell's that? And it's amazing. Started my journey into Cannes actually.
Yeah.
Which has happened very late. But what a great band.
I actually saw them in 73, I think, 72, 73, and at the University of London Union. There was hardly anybody there. It was like kind of, I don't think anybody knew who they were. And it was a great gig, but it was a very, very quite odd atmosphere, very sparsely attended gig.
I remember I remember seeing them on the Old Grey Whistle Test.
So I think that was taken at the same time.
Very sort of intense.
And that was a bit later,
but really interesting.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, this band looked really interesting.
Yeah.
But I never investigated them.
So I was reading something somewhere about a Fela Kuti album called Aphrodisiac. And I kind of blithely thought I had all the Fela Kuti albums. So I went to my collection to play this album, and somebody saying they thought it was the best Fela album, then realised I didn't have it, actually. So I bought the CD reissue, which came with Aphrodisia on one, and also Open and Close as well, which is another great Fela album on there. And this is an album that's recorded at Abbey Road Studios, actually the EMI Studios. I mean, again, all Fela albums are always interesting. This one's a very dynamic kind of varied track, actually. A lot of different kind of phases on it as well. And played the title track Aphrodisia.
Starts like a kind of like a charge.
Yeah. And then goes into a really interesting kind of quieter period as well. So available on vinyl, I think, from Knitting Factory Records in the States. But Aphrodisia.
Very good. Really good. I don't have that one either. We listened to a album on the Blue Note label, Larry Young. It's called Mothership. Features Larry Young on the organ, Lee Morgan on the trumpet, Herbert Morgan on the tenor, and Eddie Gladden on the drums. And there's some great drumming on the track called Street Scene. Quite funky drumming.
Very funky drumming.
For really, again, sort of late 60s Blue Note.
Yeah.
Which got released late in the day.
Much later on, yeah.
But yeah, just again, noting, just Larry Young doesn't sound like anybody else. He really, I suppose there's a lot of organ players on the Blue Note stable, but he is instantly recognisable as being him.
Yeah. Then went from that into another kind of Liberty period Blue Note record and played part of the Little Rusty off, it's going to be hard to see this actually, off Donald Byrd's Ethiopian Nights record, which is which is one of the 3 albums he made between his kind of hard bop period and also his Isley Brothers period. So he was electric by this point, but not kind of quite as highly produced as he was later on. Great band with Joe Sample, Ed Green on drums, who we've had a lot of tonight actually, and also Wilton Felder really laying down a great bass line.
Yes, excellent.
But yeah, it's a big favourite. This is a big favourite. I don't know if there are any Jake Feinberg fans out there who listen to his show, but this is a big favourite of Jake. And he actually played the track to Ed Green, the drummer, which he does quite a lot in the show. And Ed got very excited saying, "That's amazing drumming," and he said, "That's you playing the drums."
Well, since our last show, another giant of the scene passed away as well, which was Walter Becker from Steely Dan. And yes, I mean, what an amazing duo they have turned out to be. And we played the track "Only a Fool Would Say That" off the album "Can't Buy a Thrill." Yeah,
great stuff, really. Then moved forward 3 or 4 albums to the Royal Scam and played "Green Earrings," which is an absolutely fantastic track off this, with some great drumming from Bernard Purdie, I think, and Chuck Rainey. So yeah, I don't need to say much about Steely Dan, really.
No.
I mean, they were an absolutely crucial band for me. Yeah.
And me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they kind of were the glue between kind of popular music and jazz, really, I think.
It's like the Beatles with jazz, really.
Yeah, in a way. Maybe Steely Dan and Bowie were the Beatles of the 70s.
Yeah. And what's interesting now, whenever you hear a Steely Dan track, you always want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you just heard it 5 minutes before, which is very little music that has that effect, really.
Often regarded as the masterwork. Although, I mean, I don't know, I like all the albums, but we listened to Peg off Aja.
Yeah.
Yeah, with those amazing backing vocals, very sort of weird intervals that the harmony singers are singing at Michael McDonald's.
Yeah.
They're very weird but beautiful.
And on the television thing where they took apart the album, they isolated that backing vocals, so it sounded completely mad.
Yes.
They don't sound like they actually belong to anything. Actually, never mind Peg. Mark played, actually a few sessions ago, a track off the Steely Dan Greatest Hits, and it reminded me actually that there's a track here at the Western World which is only available on the Greatest Hits package, which is a beautiful song, and I think it was recorded between Katie Lyde and Royal Scam, I think, actually. Very, very nice song. A beautiful song about taking heroin in a whorehouse, which is kind of typical Steely Dan. This is a great collection, this, actually, because the mastering on it's fantastic as well. So I got this recently for like £1.50 or something like that, ridiculous.
Oh, yes. This is Michael Gregory Jackson is an artist that I knew nothing about, but I think it was John Coltrane 68, who recommended actually another album by this guy, Michael Gregory Jackson. I think he's absolutely amazing, actually, guitarist and singer. And this is an album called Gifts. Don't often see his albums around. But this, he's just got a completely unique and original sound. So it was a little bit Pat Metheny-esque, but...
It doesn't sound like anybody really.
No, it doesn't really. Yeah, really good. I mean, everything I've heard of his, I've only got 2 albums, but I'm looking for the others.
We played one a few sessions ago as well.
Did you play one?
Yeah. Which is very... Yeah, the guitarist Bill Frisell's a massive fan of Michael Gregory Jackson. He's been promoting him a lot, which is good, I think, actually. Get some attention. He's still around. Then another kind of tribute to both Harry Dean Stanton and the actor Harry Dean Stanton and Sam Shepard, the writer, played to the title track of Paris, Texas by Ry Cooder, which still sounds great soundtrack album, actually. Particularly interesting that it was basically the whole soundtrack was made just by 3 musicians. I love this film, actually loved Harry Dean Stanton, so that was an excuse to play somewhere.
Great, it sounded amazing. This was an album that I also picked up, I think, at the same record fair that John and I were talking about a couple of months ago. This is the other half of it, there was 2 albums that John Trippier did, where he used this kind of lineup of Will Lee on the bass and Steve Gadd and Rick Marotta, both on different right and left channels on the drums. And we listened to the track called "To Touch You Again" / Lady Blue. It sounded really, really lovely, actually. Got Richard T on the piano, Don Grolnick on the Rhodes. Kind of sounded like a precursor to the sort of slightly more bland, smooth jazzish stuff.
Yeah.
But it isn't bland at all.
No, that's right.
It's really lovely
John
playing.
Trippier was best known for playing on Deodato's Prelude album. That was his kind of breakthrough record, I think. So. Then went for the Giants box, which is the Don Sobieski box set on CTI. Each track's got a very different lineup on it, and played a track featuring the alto saxophonist Paul Desmond, where he basically does a version of Joni Mitchell's "Song of the Seagull." So basically, Paul Desmond and Joni Mitchell, you can't really go wrong, really. This again is quite easy to find and pick up. This record, actually, I always quite like the cover, actually, a bit grotesque, actually, I must admit. But yeah, so I mean, it's got some great stuff on it. It's got a really good version of "Free as a Bird" as well, with some fantastic guitar playing from John McLaughlin as well. Yeah, good album.
And interesting enough, I had also, before John played that, had lined up a Paul Desmond album, which is Desmond Blue, which is Paul Desmond with strings, which are arranged and conducted by Bob Prince. And we also, there's lots of Jim Hall on this album as well. And we listened to the first track on side 2 called "I Should Care." It's a mono recording. It sounded really nice.
Yeah, I've always really liked Paul Desmond. Jim
Yeah.
Hall, actually. Then we're starting to mellow out even more. We seem to, as Mark said quite right, we seem to have Bobby Hutcherson at almost every session.
Yes.
Actually. But I'm a big fan of his. From the album Stick Up with Blue Note, played a track called Verse, which featured Joe Henderson on tenor sax, McCoy Tyner on piano, Herbie Lewis on bass, and Billy Higgins on drums. Some great Joe Henderson, actually, and Billy Higgins is really great on this track as well, actually. This was a kind of mid to late, probably 66, 67, something like that. Bobby Hutcherson records. Again, can't really...
Lovely Joe Henderson solo.
Great Joe Henderson stuff, very breathy kind of solo. Can't really go wrong.
Breathy, but then kind of like
Yes.
goes kind of really out.
Yeah.
We stayed very mellow and vibesy with a track from this Tjader album.
I've never seen before.
No, which is called "Last Night When We Were Young," and this is another jazz artist with a string section. This is from the mid-70s, and we listened to his version of the Burt Bacharach tune "A House Is Not a Home." It's basically this was just vibes and Rhodes together, so it was very, very dreamy.
Yeah.
I think our aged whiskey was definitely...
Yes, kicking in by then
Kicking
as
in.
well. With my fruity voice as well. Then last session I was going to play a tribute to Jerry Allen, the pianist, who died far too young, actually. Very talented pianist, worked a lot with this trio, with Paul Motion and Charlie Hayden. And suddenly I realised just when I was putting this on, all 3 of these people are dead now, which seems awful, actually. And played a lovely version of "Lonely Woman," the Ornette Coleman tune on here. This is they made about 5 or 6 different records. This was the first one, which I think is generally thought of as being the best, although they're all pretty good, actually. Just great piano trio music, and Jerry Allen, sadly, just too young to die, really.
Last track was purchased at the Vinyl Head record shop in Ramsgate last month. And this, John had played a track by the Detroit Spinners, and it was a revelation, because the albums in the UK are always... Well, no, they're not called by the Detroit Spinners.
They're called the Detroit Spinners only
But
in the UK.
the American albums are the Spinners, and there's a really not a band, a kind of UK band called the Spinners, who definitely don't sound like this. So I've been avoiding albums that are by the Spinners, but in fact, it's another kind of Tom Bell project, really. And we listened to a track called "Sitting on Top of the World." Really, really great.
Felipe Wynn on
doing his thing.
vocals. And then to completely chill us out, finished off with Alan Toussaint's Southern Nights from his album Southern Nights, which is just a kind of very, very dreamy track. In fact, with I think his voice going through sounds like a Leslie speaker or something like that, giving a very, very. But this is from the 3 albums Alan Toussaint made on Warner Brothers, which all of which are really good. Actually, I quite like Motion as well, the 3rd one. A lot of people don't like that.
Just noting we're at nearly 36 minutes.
Oh, it's the longest session. Okay. So you should shut up. We're going on.
Just
It's
to
all
say,
good stuff.
I'll put a link under the video. I'm now doing this fortnightly radio show, and they're all going up onto Mixcloud.
It's
So
very good.
yeah.
Highly recommended.
yeah, but we're getting over the technical issues that no one actually seems to know what they're doing in the studio. But I can certainly play the records, and at some stage you'll be able to hear my voice as well as the tunes. But yeah, have a listen. See you soon, folks.